I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but everyone watching this speech today is going to die someday. And it'll likely be someone like me who's responsible for helping you get to your final resting place. I never imagined how familiar with death and dying I would become at my current position. Since last year, I have been a patient transporter in South Bay's largest medical facility. I've witnessed a lot more death than I expected. Having myself experienced traumatic death and injuries in my life, I find myself uniquely qualified to serve not only the dead but their families and help them with what they're going through. While some of you may die elsewhere, the majority of you are going to die in a hospital. The hospital I work at, it's important to note, is not a trauma facility. According to American Trauma Society, trauma hospitals are equipped to handle every type of accident and emergency. This means trauma hospitals have gunshot wounds, car accidents, and things of that nature, whereas the hospital that I work at focuses more on natural deaths. Per the San Diego Community Health Statistic Unit, the two leading causes of death are cancer and heart disease, which are considered more of a natural death, and those are more the things I'm dealing with on a daily basis. Once someone dies in our facility, they are cleaned by a certified nursing assistant and bagged, and then they wait for a transporter like myself or one of my coworkers to come and grab them to take them downstairs to the hospital morgue where they will wait in the freezer for a mortuary or a crematorium or a donation center to come and get their bodies. Dying varies from person to person, just like living does. Depending on an individual or their family's will, what follows next will vary. In donation cases, or depending on religious preferences, a regular transport to a funeral home won't occur. According to Yale Medicine, brain death is a legal and medical determination of death. Brain dead patients who are under care in our hospital may sometimes opt to donate their entire body to either science or to donate to somebody in need. In that case, we perform what's called an honor walk at my work, where every staff who's available lines the hallway while this patient is pushed between us to the operating room to have their organs harvested. It's an extremely moving thing, and this person is ultimately saving so many lives, but it's obviously very sad to see somebody who is otherwise bodily healthy to pass away, essentially. For those not brain dead but still organ donors, viable organs may be harvested after their death. Things like skin, tissue, and corneas are some of the things that donation centers can come pick up. There's a donation center in San Diego that's called the Eye Bank, and they need to act fast after somebody dies because the corneas are only viable for 24 hours after a patient dies. I've been able to watch an eye technician work on a deceased patient and remove their cornea to take for either science or to give the gift of sight to somebody who has become blind due to a damaged cornea. It's a very interesting process to watch. Per an article from literary scholar Susan Stevens, Charon's obol is a Greek funerary custom in which coins are placed on the eyes of the dead. Now, this is so that the person dying can cross the river of Styx and pay the boatman who will ferry them across this river. This is an old, like I said, Greek mythology thing, but it's often a modern custom that people will request. I've had this request happen in the hospital, and depending on the administrative liaison, which is a nurse who oversees the entire hospital and all of its operations, we can do this for a patient depending on their approval, and I have had to do that for somebody before. My role in these situations really requires a lot of emotional intelligence and empathy for those experiencing what is often the worst moment in their entire lives. People with a dying patient in the hospital have often asked me if I've gone through anything like that. Just last week, somebody asked me, have either of you in this room lost a parent? And I got to share my experience with that patient and give them a little bit of a humanizing moment during this time in the hospital. I feel a great emotional attachment to all of my patients, but most especially those who have passed on. I try to radiate positivity because I'm being entrusted with something that very few people on the planet are able to do. I always honor my patients by honoring the memory of the individual and trying to keep them in a positive thought or light in a form of non-denominational prayer, if you will. Especially if I've transported that person while they're alive. It is a little bit jarring to see somebody who was in a wheelchair last week and then you're called upon to move their body down to the morgue and they're no longer in their body. So it's a very interesting thing. And while some of you might perceive this topic to be a little bit bleak, I feel that dealing with death regularly has evolved my perceptions of life and what it means to be alive. I hope learning this will stay with you as well, and you will see the inevitable light in this usually dark thing, which is dying. And a lot of people feel that that is a darkness, but I hope I'm learning some of the things that I deal with on a daily basis helps kind of humanize it a little bit and give you some perspective. So thank you for listening to me.